Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all our virtual attendees present here. We have all assembled here today to be a part of the national webinar organized by the Postgraduate and Research Department of Physics of St. Xavier's College Autonomous, Kolkata, titled Living in the World of Neutrinos. Neutrinos are strange and weird, and today we shall try to understand them and unravel the enigma that they are. However, before diving head-on into the strange world of the subatomic particles, I would like to invite Reverend Father Dr. Dominic Savio, S.J., Principal of St. Xavier's College, to say a few words and initiate today's program. Over to you, Father.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon, in fact, good evening to you. One speaker for the webinar, Professor Dr. Srupabadi Goswami, esteemed faculty and members of the administration, and all the participants for the webinar. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected our normal activities very seriously. However, knowledge is still accessible to all through the online medium. In keeping with the tradition of our college, the Postgraduate Research Department of Physics organized a national webinar entitled Living in the World of Neutrinos. This webinar presents an opportunity for all physics enthusiasts to access knowledge and engage in scientific discourse. The physics department is one of the oldest and prestigious departments of the college. The department was developed under the pioneering guidance of renowned Jesuits like Father Lafond, Father Westaten, and Father Bornholm, and many others. Today, the department has a renowned name in the field of scientific education in West Bengal, and has left its mark in the national scenario by building up generations of physicists who are well recognized in their fields. Over the years, the department has grown and developed into its present structure with the UG and PG departments as well as research facilities. The department also manages the Father Eugene Lafond Observatory, which apart from serving as a standard laboratory for astrophysics students, is also used for observing astronomical phenomena by the faculty, college students, and students from rural schools as part of outreach initiatives. While preparation was going on for this webinar, our country lost one of its pioneers in the field of radio astronomy, Professor Govind Swarup, this month of September. I am told that our students have prepared a short video as a tribute to this great scientist, which will be presented after a few minutes. I take this opportunity to welcome our esteemed speaker, Professor Srupabadi Goswami, who is a fellow of all three national scientific academies in our country, and the leading women scientists of our country by her own right. I also welcome our faculty members and all the webinar participants on Zoom and YouTube. I hope this lecture will fulfill your quest for knowledge and make you oblivious of the crisis generated by the raging pandemic. May this section prove to be fruitful and engaging. I congratulate the organizing team, Dr. Indranath Chaudhary, the head of the department, and all the faculty members and students for their efforts and wish them a successful event. Thank you very much. Once again, a warm welcome to this webinar. May God bless you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father Principal.
Thank you, Father, for your words of wisdom. Now, I would like to invite the coordinator of today's event, Dr. Sharbori Guho, Kover. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Uttaran and Shagnik, for giving a great start. Good afternoon, everybody. Dignitaries present here today, members of the BOS, faculty members, distinguished faculties of different institutions in and around Kolkata, participants on the Zoom and YouTube platforms, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar. We begin today's proceedings by paying our tribute to the memory of late Professor Govind Swarup, whom we lost on the 7th of September this month. Professor Govind Swarup was a pioneer in the field of radio astronomy in India. He had built two of the world's largest radio telescopes in India and nurtured a community of Indian radio astronomers that is among the best in the world. I met Professor Swarup for the first time in January 1996 at the meeting of the Indian National Committee for the International Union of Radio Science, or URSI. Subsequently, I had privilege to interact with him over 1 week at the General Assembly of the URSI in August-September 1996 in France. Since then, I interacted with him on a few more occasions in Kolkata and Pune. The students of our department are paying their tribute to this great scientist through a short video, which is going to be played now. That was indeed a very nicely edited piece of tribute. It is now my pleasant duty and privilege to introduce today's speaker, Professor Shrubhavati Goswami, who was also my classmate, both in the undergraduate and in the postgraduate classes. Professor Shrubhavati Goswami is currently Senior Professor in the Theoretical High Energy Physics Division of the Physical Research Laboratory in Ahmedabad. She did her PhD in neutrino physics from the University of Calcutta and was a postdoctoral fellow in Physical Research Laboratory and in the Shaha Institute of Nuclear Physics. She joined as a member of faculty at the Harish Chandra Research Institute in 2002 before shifting to Ahmedabad in 2008. Her research area is high energy physics phenomenology with a special emphasis on neutrino physics. She received several awards, including the Ramanujan Fellowship by DST in 2008, the Dr. P. Shield Memorial Award of NACI for Young Women Scientists in 2006, the Humboldt Fellowship from Alexander von Humboldt Foundation of Germany in 2005, and most recently, the J.C. Bose Fellowship of SERB, Government of India. She is an elected fellow of all three national science academies in India. She is also a member of the India-based Neutrino Observatory collaboration. She has published more than 150 research papers in top-ranking research journals, with nearly 50 papers in the prestigious Physical Review D and a number of papers in the Physical Review Letters. As I welcome her to deliver her lecture today, I'd like to remind our audience about a few important points to ensure that the proceedings can be conducted smoothly. There will surely be many queries in the minds of the participants. Therefore, participants on both the Zoom as well as on YouTube platform are requested to type their questions in the chat box. Unless advised otherwise, all participants are requested to keep their microphone muted and the video turned off. Near the end of the lecture, the link for the feedback form will be posted in the YouTube comment section and also in the chat box of Zoom. Please fill it up. This is necessary for us to issue the participation certificates. We all are indeed living in the world of neutrinos. Every moment, millions and millions of neutrinos are bombarding our planet from the sun and from outer space. But we are completely oblivious of these happenings. This is indeed very astonishing. So let us now hear about the mysterious neutrinos from an expert like Professor Subhabhuti Goswami. The title of her today's lecture is Neutrinos from Impossible Dreams to Unreachable Stars. Over to you, Professor Goswami. The webinar is now yours.
Thank you, Dr. Guho, for that nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Father Principal, Dr. Chaudhary, and all the other attendees of the webinar. It's really a privilege for me to be part of this webinar and able to give this seminar. Since I belong to Calcutta, it holds a special privilege for me to be able to take part in a webinar arranged by one of the most prestigious colleges in Calcutta. So with that, let me start my seminar on neutrinos, which I titled From Impossible Dreams to Unreachable Stars, and I hope to share with you, the meaning of this title. So, as the title says, the story of the neutrino is really a story of the impossible dreams to unreachable star. And this impossible dream was dreamt by Wolfgang Pauli in 1930. And he wrote a letter, and that letter said this. He wrote in Germany. The English translation reads like this: Dear radioactive ladies and gentlemen, I have hit upon a desperate remedy to save the law of conservation of energy. There could exist electrically neutral particles that I wish to call neutrons, which have spin half and they obey the exclusion principle. I agree that my remedy could seem incredible, but only the one who dare can win. Dear radioactive people, look and judge, your humble servant, Pauli. So it was why he had to propose this. he had to propose this because of some anomaly observed in radioactive decays. Now it was known that there are three kinds of, we also know now that three kinds of radiation, from radioactive decays of nucleus. These are alpha, beta, and gamma. And the problem was observed in beta decay. So in beta decay, as at that time, it was known that a nucleus is getting converted to an electron and another daughter nucleus. So if you consider the energetics of the reaction, then if we should have the electron should be emitted with the energy which is fixed, given by the difference of the energy of the daughter and the mother nucleus. However, what was observed was a continuous energy spectrum for the electron. Then what is the reason for this? And is conservation energy a problem, that it is not valid in the domain of this kind of nuclear reactions, radioactive decays? That was the question. And Pauli said that no, the conservation of energy should be valid. And there should be another particle which should carry the energy. So with this new particle, which he called neutron, but later it was called neutrino, then the reaction will look like a three-body reaction. So the energy difference between the daughter and the mother nucleus will be shared by the electron and the neutrino, and that will give a continuous spectrum. So the proposition of the neutrinos helped in restoring the energy conservation. Enrico Fermi gave the name neutrino, which means little neutral one in Italian, and he gave also a theory of beta decay. Now it was seen that to satisfy all the conservation laws of nature, neutrinos have to be massless, or they have to have very small mass, neutral because the charge has to be conserved, spin half, weakly interacting. So all these properties make it very difficult to detect the neutrino experimentally. That's why it was called a ghost particle, and Pauli said that I did something which can never be detected. However, luckily for us, this impossible task was made possible in 1956 by Clyde Cowan and Fred Rines, 25 years after the neutrinos were proposed. So you can imagine the difficulty in detecting the particle, because it took 25 years to first detect the neutrino, and they used antineutrinos produced in nuclear reactors. Hello? Okay. Just 1 second. I want to do a full screen, but maybe I have to do it here. Second, I want to make it a full screen, but somehow it is not giving me the command.
Ma'am, you can press Ctrl+L.
Yeah, I can try that. Command L. Okay, now it's full screen. Now it's fine, right? Hello?
It didn't really change.
It didn't change. In my screen, it changed.
Acha.
Just check, there may be a time lag between Zoom and YouTube. So Zoom is okay, fine. It's only YouTube. I think it is okay. Please proceed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they used the antineutrinos produced in nuclear reactors, and for which Nobel Prize was awarded to F. Rines in 1995. And I really liked the title of Rines Nobel lecture. You know, it's not, Clyde Cowan has unfortunately passed away in 1974, and Nobel Prize is not awarded posthumously. So the lecture of Rines was titled The Neutrino from Poltergeist to Particle. So it was a ghost, but you know, until you detect it, it became a particle. So why they thought of, doing this experiment? So what he said in this Nobel lecture was that the Second World War had a great influence on the lives and careers of very many of us for whom those were formative years. I was involved during and then subsequent to the war in the testing of nuclear bombs, and several of us wondered whether this man-made star could be used to advance our knowledge of physics. For one thing, this unusual object certainly had lots of fissions in it and was a very intense neutrino source. So he thought of using the nuclear bomb to some, effective use. And he wrote to Fermi, and later he thought that they should use the nuclear reactor, and he again informed Fermi. And Fermi wrote to him that I was very much interested in your new plan for the detection of the neutrino. Certainly your new method should be much simpler to carry out, and I have the great advantage that the measurement can be repeated any number of times. So the new method was to use the nuclear reactors, which produces electron antineutrinos. So they used a detector, which was a scintillator type of detector, and the antineutrinos will interact with the proton to produce neutron and positron. Then this positron will unite with the electrons to produce two gammas, and the neutrons are absorbed by the cadmium in the target, in the detector, to produce one gamma. So they observed 3 photons in coincidence. So that was the signal, and they found a positive signal, and this was the radiogram which he sent to Pauli, that we are happy to inform you that we have definitely detected neutrinos from fission fragments by observing inverse beta decay of protons. Observed cross-section agrees well. So they checked that the observed cross-section agrees well, and they detected the neutrino. So that was the story of the detection of the neutrino. So actually, we now know that there are neutrinos and antineutrinos, and what is emitted with beta minus decay, beta decay is an antineutrino. And electron type of neutrino, so the Pauli's neutrino is an electron type of neutrino which is always emitted with an accompanying electron. So the question is this the only type of neutrino, or there are other neutrinos also? That was so now we know that there are 3 types of neutrinos: nu e, nu mu, and nu tau. All are experimentally, and they are associated with the charged leptons, electrons, muons, and tau. So these particles, neutrinos, electrons, nu mu and muons, and nu tau, or the tau neutrino and tau, collectively they are called leptons. And each has an associated charged lepton partner, and when they interact, the neutrinos interact, then they produce a charged lepton with which they can be, which is the signal for the type of neutrino. So the question which is, we do a lot of research now on, is that whether there are all these are the 3 neutrinos, or there are more. That is a current research problem which is not yet settled. So I won't discuss that, but I just wanted to tell that, that 3 neutrinos are well established, and there are research going on and experiments also to find out whether there are more. So these neutrinos can be emitted from different sources, and they span a very wide range of energy. You can see from 10 to the minus 2 eV to 10 to the 18 eV. So it can have a large energy range. They can come from the Big Bang, which produces the universe, can also produce neutrinos. The reactor and reactor neutrinos we talked about, through which the neutrinos were first detected. There are also accelerators which can produce neutrinos, high energy accelerators. Then we can have the neutrinos from the sun, from supernova explosion in the atmosphere. Then we can also have neutrinos from galactic and extragalactic sources, and all these types of neutrinos have been detected. So we will discuss little bit of these neutrinos. So the cosmic microwave background, we know that gives a lot of photons per and the temperature is around 3 Kelvin. There is also a cosmic neutrino background, which has the temperature of about 2 Kelvin. The cosmic neutrinos are very weakly interacting. So these neutrinos decoupled very early in the universe, but they are still there. So they are the second most abundant particle in the universe. So if there are so many neutrinos, then why don't we see them? So here is some tentative numbers, that we receive billions and billions of neutrinos from the sun, from neutrinos from the natural radioactivity of the earth, from nuclear power plants all over the world. But the reason that we cannot notice them is that they are very, very weakly interacting. So this cross section, which is the measure of their interaction strength, is about 10 to the minus 38 centimeters for a typical energy of 1 GeV. You can see that this is a very, very small number. So, as I said, the neutrino is detected by observing the leptons. So, the charged leptons, electron neutrino will produce an electron, the mu will produce a muon. And because the cross section is so low, they are very weakly interacting, we need to have very big detectors. They has to be deep, so that we don't have, supposing we want to measure a signal from some source, then the cosmic radiation should not create a signal, and they have to be clean to reduce the radioactive background. So these are the properties of a good detector. And the Super Kamiokande detector in Japan is a massive detector which has a 50 kiloton of water, and they detect neutrinos by various reactions in various energy ranges. We will hear more about this detector, but I just wanted to tell you that you need kind of 50 kiloton water, then you get some maybe about 20-30 events per day. So that is the thing, that we have to wait to collect a sufficient number of statistics. And then the question is that, and you can see the size, that as compared to the size of a human being, that such huge detectors are needed. So if it needs such a big effort, then why are we interested in detecting them? There are many reasons, and the few of them are like responsible for the sun to shine. They are everywhere. They carry information from stars, and by which I mean that as I said, neutrinos are weakly interacting, so they can come straight from, say, this is the sun, from the sun, whereas a proton gets trapped and they interact, so they move in a zigzag path. But the neutrinos can come straight, so they can come earlier, much earlier than the photons, and they can carry information about the stars. And also we will see that they pose interesting puzzles, and solving these puzzles tell us about the neutrino properties, and may tell us more about the universe as well. So the neutrinos from the sun are very important, because we know the sun is a very important star in our lives. It gives us the heat and energy, and with that the photosynthesis occurs. So for our living, the sun is very important. But not many would know. Yes.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? I think your slides are not changing. It's still stuck on slide 10. Are you still on slide 10?
No.
It's stuck on slide 10, ma'am.
So then you have to interrupt me a little early. I don't know. Let me see. Okay. Just a second.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
So I need to share the screen again. This has not yet come, no?
No, ma'am, it's still white. It's coming. Ma'am, I guess you are sharing a pen tab.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it's a whiteboard.
So I shared it. Just one second. Should I run it then? Because it's not giving me the Zoom screen at all. It's some whiteboard has come from somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
You are right. Now it has come. Okay. Has it come now?
Yes, ma'am. We are seeing slide number 11.
Okay. Okay, so I will just quickly go through the slides, which you did
Okay.
not see. I will be a little quick because I have already told.
Okay, ma'am.
So this was the slide on which you were with me up to slide 10, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Interrupt me if the slide doesn't change, okay? It is
Okay, ma'am.
fine because I have gone so far. So
Okay, ma'am.
then in slide 11, what I was saying was that this Rhines, about the Rhines and Cowan experiment, that they were in the Second World War and they wanted to use the nuclear bomb for a good use. So that's why they said that they should want to use it, but later they thought that it's better to use the nuclear reactor, and they wrote to Fermi, and Fermi said that it is that he liked this idea better because it's a controlled source. So he said that I like this will be certainly your new method should be much simpler to carry out and have the great advantage that the measurement can be repeated any number of times. So it is a controlled source. So this was the first detection in which antineutrino was captured in a proton to give a neutron and a positron, and this positron will combine with the electron to give two photons, and the neutron will combine with the cadmium in the detector to give another photon. So these three photons in coincidence was the signal, and they observed a positive signal and they sent a telegram to Pauli that we are happy to inform you that we have detected the neutrinos from fission fragments by observing inverse beta decay of protons. So then this was the electron type of neutrino. We know now that it's an electron type of antineutrino, and I am changing, right? Slides are changing.
No, ma'am, it's on 11.
Okay. Now, has it gone to 12?
No, ma'am, not yet. Still on 11.
Because, I changed my internet and but maybe I will not use the video.
Yes, you can turn off your video so you'll get better data.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Now we can see 12.
Okay. Okay. So okay. 12 and 13 was the detection. I think that you have understood that this was the signal. Then I am on 14. I will tell the slide, okay? So 14
Ma'am, now
was
we are on 12. Ma'am, can you do one thing? Whenever you change the slide, just inform us so that if it
the,
doesn't change, we can tell you back.
yeah. So 13, in 13, are you on 13?
No, ma'am, we are still seeing 12.
So there is, I think there is a time lag. Let's wait.
Yeah.
And we are still in 12.
So I will tell the slide number.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, still on 12.
Now 13 has come.
No, ma'am.
Okay, I should do one thing. Let me send the slides to you, okay?
Ma'am, now we
Shortcut?
are on 14.
You are on 14. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So the 13 is important because it shows the reaction that
Yes, ma'am, we can see 13. We can see 13.
Antineutrino is absorbed by the proton, reacts with the proton to produce a photon, two photons, and then there is another photon from the neutron and the cadmium. This was the signal. Now in 14,
Yes, ma'am, we are seeing
14 is just a telegram which they sent to Pauli saying that they have detected the neutrinos. On 15,
Yes,
what
ma'am.
I am saying is that there is an antineutrino. Actually what is emitted in beta decay is an antineutrino. It is always emitted with an accompanying electron. So the question is, are there any other type of neutrinos? That one asked. So the slide 16 shows that there are three types of neutrinos: electron neutrino, muon neutrino, and tau neutrino. And they are so called because they are, when they interact with the matter, with their weak interaction, but they produce, nevertheless, when they interact, they produce a electron, muon, and tauon. So that's why they are called like that. Collectively, these particles are called leptons. And the question which is there now is that whether there are more neutrinos apart from these three neutrinos, which is a current research topic. There are some data, there are some experiments going on, but it's not established. So I will not talk about this. Now on slide 17, I am showing all the neutrino sources that are possible. And we can have energy from say 10 to the minus 4 EV to 10 to the 18 EV. And the neutrinos can come from various sources like the Big Bang, which has produced the universe, which has created the universe. From that we can have the neutrinos. We can have neutrinos from the sun, so supernova, atmospheric neutrinos. I will discuss about this. Reactor neutrinos, we already saw. The accelerators can also produce neutrinos. So these are some of the things we will learn. The slide 17 shows that the neutrinos are the second most abundant particle in the universe, because like the cosmic microwave background, which from which we have the cosmic microwave photons, we also have the cosmic neutrino background, and they are the second most abundant. Their abundance is 300 neutrinos per cc, and temperature is slightly lower than the photons because they have decoupled earlier than the photons. So then on slide 19, I just had a view graph that why we don't see them, because they are very, very weakly interacting, 10 to the minus 38 centimeter square for about 1 GeV. So that is very weak interaction. And that's why to detect the neutrinos, one need very big detectors. It has to go deep because to reduce the other backgrounds. So it has to be deep and clean. And that one such example is the Super Kamiokande detector in Japan, which uses 50 kiloton of water. Now I am in slide 22, in which I am showing the scale that we need. Super Kamiokande detector has about 40 interactions per day or something. So to have, you can see that how much more you have to have the detector as comparison to a schematic diagram. The ratio of a human size to the detector size we can see. So then the question is, if it is so difficult, it will need very big detectors, need special efforts to place them underground in a mine or something. Then why should we detect them? What is the advantage? And in slide 23, I am changing, right?
Yes, ma'am, you are. Now we are seeing slide number 23.
Okay. So the one of the thing is that they're responsible for the sun to shine. They are everywhere. They carry information from the stars. So you can see that the photon comes in a zigzag path, but the neutrinos come straight. And so they carry information. They come much before the photon comes. So they can carry information, of that earlier time. And we will see that they pose many interesting puzzles for us. And to solving them lead us to clues about many properties of fundamental particles and things like that. So the solar neutrinos are very important because with the heat and energy, a lot of neutrinos are coming from the sun. Also in the atmosphere, the cosmic rays, which are charged particles coming from extragalactic sources, they react with the air molecules to produce pions. So the cosmic rays are also natural laboratories for producing fundamental particles. They produce a particle called pion, which decays to give this nu mu. So I said there is another type of neutrino, which is a nu mu, and they produce nu mu and their antiparticles and also the electron type of neutrinos. And one of the first detection of these neutrinos, these are called the atmospheric neutrinos. They were in the Kolar gold mine in India in 1965. So also the neutrinos can be produced from supernova explosion. So somehow the number has not come. Are you on the supernova explosion slide?
Yes,
ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So I am discussing various sources. I discussed about the sun, about the atmospheric neutrinos, and then I am discussing about the supernova. So supernova explosion is how a star dies. Not all, but stars of certain mass, like which is about 10 to 40 solar mass stars. And, it's a, you can understand much of basic physics from that. So what happens is there is a fusion reaction, and then in the star there are fusion reactions, and it goes on. And when the iron is produced, then no further fusion can take place. And then what happens is that usually the radiation pressure balances the gravitational pull. However, because the fusion stops, the gravitational pull does not get balanced. This is called the Chandrasekhar mass limit, and then the collapse starts. And when the collapse starts, then what happens is that there is collision between imploding this matter, and then there is a mechanism called shock waves, because different layers move with different velocities, and that's how the star explodes. The very interesting thing is that so the star was very hot, and this becomes a neutron star, the core. And this cooling is through the neutrino emission, and we have about 10 to the 58 neutrinos, and of all flavor. And this occurs about duration of 10 seconds. So about 99% of the supernova energy is released in neutrinos and 1% in photons. And as I said, they are weakly interacting, so they arrive about 10 hours before light, and that was a early warning of supernova explosion. The neutrinos can give an early warning. And a neutrino events from the supernova 1987A, which occurred in 23rd February 1987 in the Large Magellanic Cloud, was observed by the Kamiokande and the IMB detector. They observed very few events. It was not planned, because it was serendipitous, because supernova neutrinos, it happened. You have a prediction, but you exactly don't know when it will happen. And when they detected these few handful of neutrinos, but they furnished a lot of information on the supernova mechanism. So these detection of the neutrinos were such important topics that in 2002, the Nobel Prize was awarded to Ray Davis and Masatoshi Koshiba for pioneering contribution to astrophysics, in particular for detection of cosmic neutrinos. And the Nobel citation read, Raymond Davis constructed a completely slide 29. Are we on slide 29?
Yes, ma'am.
Slide
A
29.
completely new detector, a gigantic tank filled with 600 tons of fluid, which was placed in a mine. Over a period of 30 years, he succeeded in capturing a total of 2,000 neutrinos from the sun, and was thus able to prove that fusion provided the energy from the sun. And with another gigantic detector called Kamiokande, a group of researchers led by Masatoshi Koshiba was able to confirm Davis's results. They were also able on 23rd February to detect neutrinos from a distant supernova explosion. So this was very important because this led to a new intensive field of research called neutrino astronomy. So, you know, like you can understand the significance of my title, that we started from the impossible dream of Pauli, but we could reach to the stars which were at one point of time unreachable, and through the neutrinos, and we can get complementary information through the neutrinos. So I will now discuss more about these experiments. So the Davis's experiment was the first detection of the solar neutrinos. It is called the 37 chlorine experiment in US Homestake mine. So this experiment detected the solar electron neutrinos. They will produce a 37 argon and the electron. Now what happens is that, you know, what do you do is that so the aim was to probe the solar interior with neutrinos. It was pioneered by John Buckle and Raymond Davis. And they said that, you know, if we have if we can detect the number of neutrinos, because the hypothesis of energy generation of stars will predict that this many number of neutrinos should come. And if we can detect, then we can say that, okay, it's correct. So that was their aim. So because they are very weakly interacting, they needed a very huge 600-ton detector. They used something called a cleaning fluid, which contains chlorine. And what they do is they keep the detector exposed to the sun, and after a certain number of days, they take out the chlorine, extract the chlorine chemically, and then they study the radioactive decay, extract the argon, because the neutrinos will interact with chlorine to produce argon. They extract the argons chemically and study the radioactive decay of argon, from which they can count the number of neutrinos. So you can see that, you know, if we are considering a radioactive decay of argon, then the number of days it should be exposed is such that the argon is not decayed in the detector. It should be decayed in the laboratory. So it should be less than the half-life of the radioactive decay of argon. And that's why it is called a radiochemical experiment. It was called. And what did they observe? They observed only 1/3 of the predicted solar electron neutrinos were observed. They did not observe all the neutrinos that they were expecting. So the question is, where are the missing solar neutrinos going? So there were many hypotheses at that time, because first of all, people thought that the experiment is wrong, because they were detecting very few argon atoms. You know, in this detector 600 ton, there is not even one interaction per day. So you expose for say 30 days, you will have very few argon atoms. So there may be some error in that. Then some people also thought that the calculations, solar model, you know, even if you know the energy generation through fusion, you have to have a calculation modeling the sun, which will say that the number of neutrinos predict. So they were wrong. And then there was another hypothesis that the solar electron neutrinos are getting converted to the mu and the tau neutrinos, and the detector was sensitive only to the electron neutrinos. So new experiments were planned to check these results. So now I am in slide 32, where
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
where I will show the another detector, which was actually the Kamiokande detector, which is called the Kamioka nucleon decay experiment. So this actually was the Kamioka experiment started to observe nucleon decay. So there are theories like grand unified theories, which say that the proton can decay. And that was the aim to observe of Kamioka experiment. But then they were sensitive to the solar neutrinos, and they detected the solar neutrinos. Now, Kamiokande experiment used neutrino electron scattering, so they can record an event in real time. Unlike the chlorine experiment. Chlorine experiment was keeping the detector exposed, say, from 20-30 days, and they were extracting the argon. So they were not detecting each event, recording the event. But Kamiokande experiment, because it's a scattering experiment, they were detecting the event. And so they verified that the neutrinos are coming from the sun. Later, the Kamiokande was upgraded to Super Kamiokande with a much larger volume, about which I told you earlier. But however, all these experiments, as can be seen in slide 33, all these experiments showed that there is a deficit of the solar neutrinos. So what does these few graphs mean? This yellow part is the theoretical prediction, and these shaded other colors are the uncertainties in the theoretical prediction. However, you can see this is the chlorine experiment, this is the Kamiokande experiment, and this is super Kamiokande, and this is another experiment, gallium, which also used the radiochemical technique, but they were sensitive to something called the PP neutrinos, which are lower energy neutrinos. And all these experiments are sensitive to something called the 8 boron neutrinos, which are higher energy neutrinos. And blue is the experimental observation. So you can see that the blue is less than the yellow in all the experiments. So observed, and all these experiments were sensitive to the electron neutrinos. So what they found was that observed nu flux is less than the theoretical prediction. This came to be known as the solar neutrino problem, and this remained unsolved for 30 years. And how was it solved? It was solved finally by the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, or the SNO experiment in Canada. And what was the speciality of this experiment? SNO used something called heavy water as opposed to normal water in Super Kamiokande and Kamiokande. And heavy water has deuteron, so it's D2O. And the neutrinos will interact with the deuteron in two ways. So, neutrinos can interact, the electron type of neutrinos can interact to produce a electron, but all the types of neutrinos can also produce, and they can just scatter to give the same type of neutrino. So this nu x can be nu e, nu mu, and nu tau. So they can detect separately the electron type of neutrino and all three types of neutrino. And what did they observe? They observed 1/3 electron type neutrinos and 2/3 mu and tau neutrinos. So they indeed established that the solar neutrinos are getting converted to other neutrinos. So if you subtract this rate, electron neutrino rate from this, then you will find the mu and tau rate. And that mu and tau rate was found that the only 1/3 electron type neutrino are coming and 2/3 mu and tau neutrino are coming. But in the sun, we have produced only electron neutrinos. So their experiment showed that when the neutrinos traveled from sun to the detector in Earth, then they got converted to the mu and tau type of neutrinos. So what happens is that in the sun, an electron type of neutrinos start, and when they pass through the distance and reach the Earth, then we get a combination of neutrinos. So it is like, you start with some ice cream flavors and you go home and you find that there are 3 flavors, and it oscillates. So you get a lot of variety, and you would be very happy about it. And we were also very happy about it, because when the neutrinos change themselves in this way, then that can happen due to a quantum mechanical phenomena which is called neutrino oscillation. And neutrino oscillation says that neutrinos are weakly interacting, but they mix among themselves. So they don't have so many friends, though they have only their 3, and they change their identity during the flight. And this is neutrino oscillation. So this is like, this is like a interference, and this is while they propagate, and that is called neutrino oscillation. So I have a simple slide to explain neutrino oscillations to those who are little advanced. And this happens, neutrino oscillation happens if neutrinos have mass. And I have told you earlier that when Pauli postulated the neutrino, it was thought that it is massless. But the neutrino oscillations can happen only if there is mass. And that can be explained in this way, that, if I have the nu mu and nu tau, if the neutrinos are massive, then they are superposition of the light and the heavy states. Light and the heavy states are states of different mass, and theta denotes the mixing angle. So when they evolve when they propagate, then this superposition state evolves. So what happens is that the heavier state will fall behind the lighter state. So then what happens is that as a result, if a certain combination of the heavy and light gives me a new mu, but when I go at a later stage at after a certain distance or after a certain time, then I don't have that combination which produced a new mu. I have a different combination. So then this will be a combination of heavy and a different combination. So it will be a combination of nu mu and nu tau. So this is a very simple two-level quantum mechanics problem, and you can easily find the probability that the neutrino gets converted to another neutrino. So it can be nu e nu mu or nu mu nu tau. Two flavor, it is the same probability. If I assume two flavor, then it will depend on the mixing angle. It will depend on the mass squared difference, not the absolute mass, but the mass squared difference, the length traveled, and the energy of the neutrino. And it gives such an oscillatory pattern. So it depends on these parameters, fundamental parameters. So, we have to associate these fundamental parameters with the neutrinos, and neutrino oscillation can give us this information. And actually, the sun has a lot of matter. So we have to see what is the effect of the matter on this. And those are the things, which people studied. And just to mention that this was actually proposed by a scientist called Bruno Pontecorvo in 1957. In fact, he actually said that, if during the chlorine experiment, that he said if an experiment is done and the neutrinos don't come in the same number, then there may be some oscillation. And because the only one type of neutrino was known, he said that it is neutrino-antineutrino oscillation. Two neutrino was proposed by these scientists in 1962. So now we know that there are three neutrinos, and we know that there are solar neutrinos, which has been confirmed also. Solar neutrino oscillations have been observed, which has confirmed from oscillation from reactor neutrinos. Atmospheric neutrino oscillations have been observed, which is confirmed from accelerator neutrinos. And there is also the LSND experiment, about which I am not discussing, which says that there can be a fourth type of neutrino. So the atmospheric neutrinos are little important because, they also established that the neutrinos oscillate. And I talked about the atmospheric neutrinos earlier. So I will just point out the neutrinos. If you see a typical decay chain, then there are two neutrinos, and as opposed to one electron type and two muon type. Okay. And they cover a wide range and a wide path length. So they provide a broad L by E band. And so I go to the slide 43 now. So what do we expect? We expect that, I expect the nu mu nu e ratio to be 2:1. Now this produce both neutrinos and antineutrinos. And then if it is 2:1, this is expected, but the observed was about 0.9 to 1. So these are the experiments which were studying the atmospheric neutrinos, like Kamiokande, IMB, and some other experiments. And what these experiments were observing was the data by MC, means the Monte Carlo simulation results, so the theoretical prediction. So they said that this ratio should be 1 if my theory and experiment match. But many of the experiment observed that this is less than 1. And some experiment observed that this is not less than 1. So this came to be known as the atmospheric neutrino anomaly. And this problem was solved by the Super Kamiokande detector. I told you that the Super Kamiokande detector can detect solar neutrinos. It can also detect the atmospheric neutrinos, but the reaction is different. Here they are detecting by neutrino-nucleon interaction. Solar neutrinos were neutrino-electron scattering. So how can Super Kamiokande experiment establish neutrino oscillation? So this blue shows the prediction, theoretical prediction, and you can see that, so this atmospheric neutrinos, this is slide 45. You are with me, right?
Yes, ma'am. Slide 45. Zenith.
Slide 45, yeah. I am showing a view graph of this, a pictorial representation of the Super Kamiokande detector. And atmospheric neutrinos come from all sides. So you can see that there will be neutrinos which are called downgoing neutrinos. They travel about 20 kilometers. And there are neutrinos which are called the upgoing neutrinos. which travel about 10,000 kilometers, and they are coming from all direction. Now, the theoretical prediction is symmetric. They will say that, this is the number of upgoing and downgoing neutrinos. This is the curve which is symmetric about the zenith angle. So this is zenith angle minus 90, and this is plus 90. So this is plus 90 and this angle is minus 90, and it is symmetric about 0. However, what was observed was this green curve. So what was observed was these red points. And the red points say that these upward going neutrinos, this minus 90 is the upward going neutrinos which are passing through a large distance. It was much less in number, and the downward neutrinos were matching the theoretical prediction. And how can this happen? It can happen if these upward going neutrinos are passing through 10,000 kilometers, and if so, it is possible that they undergo oscillation over this distance, because this is a large distance, but the neutrinos which are coming through 20 kilometers, they don't have sufficient distance to develop the oscillations. And this green gives the fit of the data with the oscillations. This is nu mu nu tau oscillation. So this established nu mu nu tau oscillation as solution to the solar neutrino problem, the zenith angle dependence of Super Kamiokande data. And this was later confirmed by accelerator-based experiments also. So this was a remarkable discovery, both solar and atmospheric, because of which 2015 Nobel Prize for Neutrino Oscillations was given to Takaki Kajita of Super Kamiokande collaboration and Arthur B. MacDonald of the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory collaboration for the discovery of neutrino oscillations, which shows that neutrinos have mass. So in slide 47, I will read the Nobel citation. The Nobel Prize in Physics in 2015 recognizes Takaki Kajita in Japan and Arthur MacDonald in Canada for their key contributions to the experiments which demonstrated that neutrinos change identities. This metamorphosis requires that neutrinos have mass. The discovery has changed our understanding of the innermost workings of matter and can prove crucial to our view of the universe. So you can see that it's a very, very important discovery, and how neutrinos get mass is still a puzzle. And the answer to that puzzle can lead us to better understanding of the nature and the universe. So in slide 48, because Shorbori told me that I should show a little bit of my work, I wanted to see one work of ours. And we worked on the solar neutrino problem, solution to the solar neutrino problem. There were 2-3 other groups also, not only us. And we did a fitting of all the data to show what are the, because I showed you that the parameters are mass square difference and mixing angle. So we worked on what are the solutions to the solar neutrino problem, what are the values of neutrino mass square difference and mixing angle. And we did a series of analysis over spanning over 8-10 years. There were later results also and earlier also. So the scenario was like this. In 2001, we had many solutions, like we can have many possible solutions to the solar neutrino problem. However, when the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory neutral current data, which means the data in which they observed all 3 flavors of neutrinos came, then this is just the 10 to the minus 5 to 10 to the 1. So this is just this region magnified, and only this solution remained. So we did this analysis with the 2-3 other groups also. So that was one of our main contributions, that to do the analysis of the solar neutrino data during this time. So what is next in the field of neutrino oscillation? We know that there are 3 masses, 3 mixing angles, and 1 phase, because we know that there are 3 neutrinos. So if there are 3 neutrinos, then there can be 3 mass states. And I talked about 1 mixing angle between 2, but if you consider 3 neutrinos, then you can have 3 mixing angles. And you can also have a 1 complex phase that will come from how you parameterize the neutrino mixing matrix from there. And among these 2 mass square differences, if I so neutrino oscillation is sensitive to mass square difference. And if I have 3 mass states, then I can have 2 independent mass square difference. So that is known. The 2 mixing angles are measured, but one mixing angle and the phase is not yet known. We also don't know how these states are ordered, like whether this 3 state is above this state or the 3 state is below this state. So this is called normal ordering and this is called inverted ordering. So how the mass states are arranged, that is one of the puzzles that we don't know. And we don't know some of the parameters which characterize the neutrino mixing matrix. And there is this India-based neutrino observatory collaboration, which was proposed to detect atmospheric neutrinos. As I told you that, India was pioneer in detecting atmospheric neutrinos. However, later on that experiment was stopped in Kolar Gold Mine when the mine stopped, and then around 2000, when this neutrino oscillation physics was at its peak, it was discussed that India should also have an experiment, and this atmospheric neutrino experiment was considered. This is a 50 kiloton magnetized iron detector, and the advantage of this is that it can distinguish the neutrinos from antineutrinos. And I told you about the Super Kamiokande detector, which detects the atmospheric neutrinos, and the cosmic ray flux produces both neutrinos and antineutrinos. But the Super Kamiokande detector cannot distinguish between the neutrinos and the antineutrinos, but INO can. So this gives it a good sensitivity, for instance, to the mass ordering, which I was saying that is not known. So that was the hallmark of INO. Of course, there were a lot of problems starting from 2000 because of environmental issues, and INO could not start, but we are hopeful that probably these issues will be settled. And there is also another experiment, which is the deep underground neutrino experiment, which can provide a very good result on the neutrino mass ordering. This is in US, and they are making accelerator neutrinos travel 1300 kilometers, and it is aiming for groundbreaking discoveries regarding properties of neutrinos, like the mass ordering I said, or the complex phase that comes parameterize the neutrino oscillation. So, this is one part of my talk on oscillations. And then another field which is very popular with the neutrino physics now is the neutrinos from distant astrophysical sources. So this sun, I said that, when we discovered the supernova neutrinos or the solar neutrinos, the Nobel citation said that it initiated the field of neutrino astronomy. And then there was the question that whether the neutrinos can produce from other galactic and extragalactic sources. For instance, there are, oh, sorry, I think this whiteboard is on. So there is this active galactic nuclei, which is a compact region in the center of the galaxy with a high luminosity. This is the most luminous source of electromagnetic radiation, and it has been observed in in radio waves, for instance, and in other X-ray or in other radiation, the active galactic nuclei. There are also gamma ray bursts, which are sudden intense flashes of gamma rays. These are also observed. However, the question is whether these sources emits neutrinos. And to answer this question, many experiments were proposed, and one of the very important is IceCube, which is now running. And the idea was to use the, because they are coming from far, the flux is low. So the Super Kamiokande was a water detector, but whether we use the ice, because there is a large mass of ice in the South Pole, and the idea was to use the in the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. This detector is located. It is called a neutrino telescope. So this detects the neutrinos using the same Cherenkov technology which the Super Kamiokande used. The neutrinos pass through ice. If their velocity is more than the velocity of the light in the medium, then they can produce Cherenkov radiation. So these are here the photomultiplier tubes, and these are the the detectors, and these are the strings which has these are optical sensors on each string, and so this is a gigaton detector, and it's called a kilometer cube. So that is the huge volume. And IceCube, this is slide on which I called Bart and Ernie. In 2013, they first detected few neutrino events around PeV energy. So PeV is very, very high. It is around 10 to the, it is 10 to the 12 electron volt like energy. So now IceCube has isolated many high energy events. So they can measure high energy events from cosmic neutrinos. They can measure from the outside sources, extragalactic sources, atmospheric neutrinos, and these events were first measured. And they also measured in 2018 event, a high energy neutrino event, which could be correlated with a event coming from a blazar using the Fermi-LAT or MAGIC telescopes, which observe the gamma rays. So there a correlation was found, and these results showed the first ever identification of a source of extragalactic neutrinos. So we conjectured, the first question was asked that whether these extragalactic sources are emitting neutrinos, and this was the first, because of this correlation, IceCube could say that these IceCube neutrinos are coming from these extragalactic sources. And this initiates the era which we call the multi-messenger astronomy, which means detecting using neutrinos, which means detecting astrophysical objects in more than one signal. So we know that there are gravitational wave, cosmic rays, gamma rays, but you can also have the neutrinos, and which you can correlate with these events. And they don't bend in magnetic fields because they are chargeless, so they can point back straight to the source. And they don't scatter, so they can arrive directly from the regions from where light cannot come, because light comes late. So that is the thing that that is also one of the very active fields, the multi-messenger astronomy using neutrinos. And this brings to the end of my lecture. And this is I thought that I will discuss the open issues. I hope I am able to convey to you that neutrinos are weakly interacting, but it is very, very important to detect them. It was realized early on, and detecting them posed many interesting puzzles, and some of us which are solved, and there are many detectors which are planned to to study this further. And why should we study this further? Because there are many questions to which the answer we don't know. Number one is, what is the absolute mass of the neutrinos? We know that the neutrino mass square difference from oscillation, but we do not know the absolute mass. So the beta decay experiments can give you some bound, but you don't know the absolute mass. There is also another question, whether neutrinos are their own antiparticle. Why this question arises for neutrinos? Because neutrinos are chargeless. So there are, if the particles don't have charge, then they can, it is possible theoretically that they are their own antiparticle. So that possibility cannot be excluded for neutrinos, and these are called the Majorana neutrinos. And we have seen that although the neutrino mass square differences are very small, it is around 10 to the minus 5 eV squares. So which means that the mass has to be very small. And then the question is that how to generate such small masses naturally, and because no other particle has such small masses, whether the Majorana nature of the neutrinos, that neutrinos are their own antiparticle, is connected to the smallness of the mass. And there is a lot of models which says yes, these are the seesaw models, and on which a lot of work is going on, but we don't know the answer. Then we have the neutrino mixing angles, because they have the value, some values which are observed from the data, observed data. We can say what are the values and how do we get that. Then do neutrinos contribute to the matter-antimatter asymmetry of the universe? And we know there is from cosmological data, that there is a slight matter-antimatter asymmetry, of course, that is needed. Otherwise, we won't be there. And that cannot be explained from our standard, physics that we know. So whether the neutrinos contribute to that or not. Then I told that whether there are only 3 flavors of neutrinos, and all these will take us to the physics beyond the standard model of particle physics, which we know and which is well established. And also ultra high energy neutrinos, the origin and source of that. And even these neutrinos can also help us in studying neutrino properties. And I have told you some of the Nobel Prizes which have been received in neutrino field of the neutrino physics research. And I feel that answer to these questions can also fetch more Nobel Prizes to neutrino physics and may hold the key to the, more importantly, to the understanding of the nature. So with this, I would like to thank you. Stay safe, stay positive, wear your masks. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful presentation. I am sure there are a lot of questions, and we will try to answer some of them now. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Tanaya Bhattacharya to take over and conduct the question and answer session.
The slides are gone, right?
Slides
No,
are
ma'am, they're still on.
Slides are there? Okay.
If the slide is stay safe to the slide. That slide is now.
Okay.
Am I audible, Shagnik?
Yes, Tanaya, you are audible.
Okay, Shrubhavati. Thanks, Shagnik. It was a pleasure to hear you, Shrubhavati. Professor Goswami was a senior to me in Shah Institute of Nuclear Physics, Kolkata, and I feel comfortable to call her Shrubhavati. In this question answer session, we will be able to address only a few questions due to the time constraint. First, I would like to request a few participants present in the Zoom platform for asking their questions to the speaker. First, may I request Aparajita Bhattacharya to please unmute himself and ask the question that he already posted in the chat box. Aparajita.
Ma'am, it seems her mic is not working.
Okay, so should I?
You can read maybe.
Okay. Okay. So the question from Aparajita says, regarding solar neutrinos, I can't really understand why neutrinos arrive before the photons. Is it because of collision of photons inside the sun?
Yes, exactly. You know, because photons interact. If you remember, I had shown you a graph, the photons took a zigzag path. So photons are, they have electromagnetic interaction, which neutrinos don't have. So for instance, a photon will produce you have two photons produce E plus E minus pairs. So photons have the electromagnetic interaction, but neutrinos are weakly interacting. So they arrive much before the photons. So photons get trapped.
Okay, thanks, Shrubhavati. So is there any other question from the Zoom platform? I am not seeing any question typed in the chat box. But
yes, ma'am. There is one from Ohona Mojumdar.
So Ohona, please unmute yourself and ask your question to the speaker.
Good evening, ma'am. So I had one question. So how can we estimate the current mass of neutrino, and how can we have an idea of its precise measurement?
So, first of all, scientists thought that neutrinos are massless. Only when neutrino oscillation was observed, then one found that the neutrinos have mass. Now, there are several experiments. Now, neutrino oscillation, has been observed from solar neutrinos, reactor neutrinos, accelerator, atmospheric. Now, if you analyze all these data, then you can have even before that, you can, because if you remember, the oscillation depends on L and E. So you know which ballpark the mass is, and then you have to do a data analysis to get the precise values. So the data tells us the mass squared difference, because if you remember the slide on neutrino oscillation, then you can see that the neutrino oscillation depends on something called delta M square, which is M2 square minus M1 square, and M2 and M1 are the neutrino neutrino masses, but it is not giving us the absolute masses. Now, absolute mass can, the beta decay experiment, for instance, the Curie plot, and if the neutrinos have mass, then that plot will change little bit, very small, because, and so there is a sensitivity that how much small mass that experiment can probe. And it can probe about EV range mass, not, in that range. So people have to design experiments to have, more sensitivity. So it can probe about 0.23 EV, that range. But I have told you that the neutrino mass square difference, as can be seen from, this figure, if you can see, here you can see it's 10 to the minus 4 EV square. So oscillation or interference experiments, so they have sensitivity to very, very small mass square differences, okay? So this is one, that the beta decay experiment. There are also some bound which are coming from cosmology. Cosmology gives a bound on the total mass of the 3 neutrinos from the energy density of the universe calculation. And that also says that the total mass of the neutrinos is less than 1 electron volt. So all this tells you that the neutrino mass is very small. And we don't know what is the absolute mass, and for that the beta decay experiments are there, but their sensitivity is about 0.23 electron volt. So what happens is that you go up to some say 0.1 electron volt or something, and you see if you get a signal. If not, then you say that neutrino mass is less than this. So that's how it is going on now. We know the mass square difference. We know the sum of the total mass, bound on the sum of the total mass. We know the bound on a absolute mass of the state, participating electron beta decay. So that is the current situation. We don't know the exact mass.
Thanks, Rubavati Di. Now, may I request you to take a few questions from the participants attending the webinar through the YouTube streaming. Okay, so the first question is from Shagnik Bhattacharya. Why does the neutrino have a magnetic moment? What's the need of G2 Fermilab experiment?
Neutrino can have a magnet. There is no need, but neutrino can have a magnetic moment, if you consider. So neutrinos don't couple to photons, but if we consider higher order diagrams, then the neutrinos can have magnetic moment. People study that. Much earlier, there was some correlation which was observed in solar neutrino experiments. Of course, I didn't talk about it because, that was not later established. So they observed some correlation with the sunspot activities. And at that time, some explanation with neutrino magnetic moment came up. So the neutrino magnetic moment is very small in the standard model because it can come through higher order diagrams. So, but the Fermilab experiment is not for neutrino magnetic moment. I don't know which experiment you are asking. There is a mu2e gamma experiment which detects, like I said, that the neutrinos are going to, electron neutrinos are going to muon neutrinos. So the question was that if the neutrinos have a mu e can go to mu, then whether a charged muon can go to a charged electron. That also comes from higher order diagrams, and this is called charged lepton flavor violation. And there are a lot of experiments which people are planning to see if there is indeed flavor violation in the charged leptons.
Okay, the next one comes from Chandrima Kaur. How does the Majorana mass term affect the neutrinos' properties?
That's a very good question, because actually what happens is that, when Majorana neutrinos say that the neutrinos are their own antiparticle. By antiparticle, what we mean is that actually, if you tell, in mathematical terms, that it's its own charge conjugate, okay? Because it doesn't have a charge. It has some charge called lepton number, but that can be violated. There is no problem in that. So then the nu can be its own antiparticle. If such a constraint is applied, then the neutrino mixing matrix will change. Because the neutrino mixing matrix, normally what we consider in oscillation, has 3 mixing angles and 1 phase. Now, if we have the neutrinos are Majorana particle, then because of the constraint that the neutrino is its own charge conjugate state, what happens is that we can get two additional phases. Okay. Now, these two additional phases, but when we consider neutrino oscillation physics, then neutrino oscillation is not sensitive to this, because of certain things that neutrino oscillation cannot detect these properties. But there are other experiments which can detect these properties, which is called a neutrinoless double beta decay experiment, which requires a lepton number violation. And when a neutrino is its own charge conjugate, then its lepton number is violated. So to answer your question, number one is the mixing angle is changed as far as neutrino property is concerned. And second is that because it's its own charged particle, then you can have a other process, lepton number violating process. And also when we consider, the models of neutrino mass, then it's easier to have a Majorana mass, because you can write using the standard model fields, you can write mass term for the Majorana neutrinos. So it's little easier to get the Majorana mass in the and naturally small masses of the neutrinos using the Majorana mass.
Thanks, Rubabati. I think we can take one more question from the YouTube. It is coming from Kaustubh Banerjee. What information do we actually get from zenith angle?
So the zenith angle is a parameter of the experiment. So when you have any experiment, then you can define. So you have an imaginary z-axis at the detector, and these neutrinos which are coming, the direction. So the zenith angle gives you the direction from which the neutrinos are coming. So you can see here, if you go, supposing you draw a x-axis parallel to this, then that angle is 90 degrees. So this is a z-axis, and this will give you the direction. Now, so how will you see there is neutrino oscillation? There can be a reduction in the flux, which the solar neutrinos said that there is a reduction in the flux. The earlier atmospheric neutrino experiments also said that, there is a reduction in this flux ratio. But if you know the direction, and if you know that, neutrinos coming from certain direction do oscillate and certain direction do not oscillate, if your oscillation depends on the direction, then from the zenith angle, you can conclude that whether the neutrinos are oscillating or not. And if you remember, then the neutrino oscillation probability has a distance L. This L, if you calculate for this system, then this L will depend on the zenith angle. So then the neutrino oscillation probability will be different depending on the distance traveled, which means depending on the zenith angle from which they are coming. That's why it gives us an additional information. Apart from the suppression, it gives us a directional information that neutrinos from certain directions are not getting suppressed and neutrinos from certain directions are getting suppressed. So that information it gives us.
Thank you, Shrubhavati, for attending to the questions. Though it is a virtual platform, but after meeting you after so many years is really a great pleasure. Over to you, Uttaran.
Same here, Tanaya.
Thank you, ma'am. As all good things must come to an end, so have we reached the end of this wonderful event. Before proceeding further, I would like to inform that the link for the feedback form has been posted in both the Zoom chat box as well as in the YouTube chat box. Please be sure to fill the form and certificates will be given accordingly. Now I would like to invite the head of the Department of Physics, Dr. Indranath Choudhury, deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Am I visible and audible?
Yes, sir.
A very good afternoon, respected dignitaries, Professor Goswami, my dear colleagues, dear students, and all present in today's webinar. Now it's my pleasant duty to propose the vote of thanks for this national webinar organized by the Department of Physics, St. Xavier's College Autonomous, Kolkata. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all whose untiring efforts and determination has made this event possible under this new normal. I would especially like to express my sincere gratitude to respected Father Principal, Dr. Dominic Savio, SJ, respected Vice Principal, Professor Bertram Da Silva, respected Deans, Professor Tapoti Dotto and Professor Orgho Banerjee for their constant encouragement and advice. In a special way, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our guest speaker today, Professor Srubhavati Goswami, for delivering such a gripping lecture on neutrino. We all are inspired by her comprehensive exposition on this subject. Thank you, Professor Goswami. I'm grateful to Dr. Oyan Chandra, Member Secretary, Academic Council, Dr. Arup Kumar Mitro, Assistant Controller of Examination, Dr. Partho Pratim Ghosh, the IQAC Coordinator, for their support to conduct this webinar. I would like to thank Professor Romit Bid and Professor Joyati Ghosh Dostidar from the Computer Science Department for helping us to hold this event online. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to my dear colleagues from Physics Department. Dr. Sharbori Guho, the coordinator of today's webinar, needs a special mention. Her untiring efforts, determination, and guidance has made this event possible. Thank you, Dr. Guho. I also want to thank Dr. Tanaya Bhattacharya, who has been the advisor for this webinar throughout. Without her active participation, this event would not be possible. I would like to thank in a special way our beloved students, Shagnik Roy, Uttaran Ghosh, for conducting today's event efficiently. And also Srijan Shen, Shantanu Bishwas, Vishesharan Panda, Chandrarko Shahu, Protul Manna, Aryok Chakraborty, MS Dinesh, Devayu Devnath, Debonita Shaha, Debolina Kaur, Ashadul Haldar, and Shamorjit Chakraborty for their assistance to handle the online platform and helping in holding this event. Congratulations to all our students for this great team effort. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record my sincere thanks to each and every faculty members and the student present here today. And last but not the least, our attend audience in the Zoom as well as on the YouTube. Everyone who has tuned in today to be a part of this event. I am sorry if I miss someone unintentionally. We are truly thankful to each and every one of you who has been with us in spirit and in person. Looking forward for more such activities organized by the department in future. Thank you, and thank you so much.